Hello and welcome to a new pod by the URC Rewind. This is Picking the Prize. The Six Nations is back, and with it, the competition for Lion spots has well and truly begun in earnest. In this pod, we'll be looking at the contenders and the bolters from each round, as well as putting two star players head to head. Let's start the show. I am joined by the Rugby B and C policeman Ben and that Caolan. Good evening, gents.
Good
Evening,
evening.
boys.
Okay, new show, and we're keeping it snappy. First round of the Six Nations has started, and it being a Lions year, it means that every game has something on it in terms of players competing for the jerseys, that red jersey down in Australia. So we're going to make a start with our contenders, the ones who we think are in line for one of those starting jerseys, or at least putting their hands up for it. I'm going to start with you, Caolan. From the
Mhm.
game between Ireland and England in Dublin, who do you think put forward their case the best?
Well, I could have picked anyone really, but I tried to keep it away from players who might keep popping up. I know we're going to talk about that maybe with other guys, with bolters in particular. Maybe hold off because you feel like they're trending upwards. So I looked at the Ireland team sheet and I said, "Fuck it, I'll just go with number one," which is Andrew Porter. Who was to be fair, he was absolutely brilliant. At the weekend, I think a lot of Porter's work, you can look at it through the prism of, is he a great scrummager? Technically, no. Powerfully, yes. Like that's you need to get scared seeing the screenshot there, like of him. He's a ferocious being. But what I loved about Andrew Porter in this game, and this is such an intangible, but it is the type of stuff that gets brought up around Lions time. There was a number of periods in that game where Ireland were struggling on the back foot. They were kind of getting bullied. England were picking fights. Porter was making the biggest hits. He was in the middle of every brawl, every argy-bargy, whatever you want to call it. He was the one just being an absolute menace. And there is something to be said for that. Now, I'm not saying that that's the sole reason you bring him. Like, for me, he's my starting loose head for the Lions. But on a weekend where Ellis Genge wasn't terrific, he wasn't bad. He wasn't terrific, though. Pierre Schumann was decent, I think it's fair to say. I think Porter just I just think it's his shirt. I think number one is his. And we'll get on to, you know, contenders for captaincy. For second row will be interesting. For the back line, centres in particular, I'm sure we'll get on to across the next 7 weeks or however long Six Nations is. But I just think Andrew Porter has shown time and time again, especially in big games, that he has that temperament. The fact that he hasn't gone on a Lions tour is unfortunate because he was injured back in 2021. Got injured playing in the Rainbow Cup. Throwback Thursday there for anyone listening
Hmm.
late in the week. But yeah, no, I there's no better place to start. I think Porter is. I'm not going to say he has nailed down the starting berth because a lot can happen. Especially with how often rugby changes laws as much as anything else. But I think it's fairly comfortable now at this particular moment in time.
Well, here was me thinking that scrummaging sideways is illegal already. But Ben, what's your take on Andrew Porter then? So as we're kind of joking about there, so his scrummaging has come under scrutiny a bit in the past, and some days may be good, some days maybe not, in terms of the referee's interpretation. So what's your view on Andrew Porter and what he brings?
I think he's an outstanding loose head. I think he's head and shoulders above the other contenders. I do love Pierre Schumann. I think Porter and Fagerson are in the same elite group of loose head and tight head. I'd like to see them at 1 and 3. That would be my, wish for the summer. I do like Andrew Porter. I think he's a humble bloke as well. I like the way he sort of presents himself. I like the way he goes about the pitch. And the scrummaging aside, it is an interpretation. It's just, again, it's going to come down to who the referees are, and maybe Andy Farrell has to take that into consideration when he selects the front row if he does have question marks over Porter. But yeah, he's just there's that effort from him all the time. I think he's fantastic to watch, and yeah,
Who would
I
he be
think
up against? Tanyana Tupou, Tongan Thor?
Yeah,
yeah,
which
we two co-eds. I think.
stylistically would be the best matchup for Porter. He's really the only prop he's really struggled scrummaging with. That is a hard sentence to say. Is Weenie Antonio, who was the biggest tight head in the competition. So Tupou wouldn't be ideal, but anytime Ireland have played Australia, he's actually done all right against him. So I'd still give him the benefit. I think that a lot of it is Porter is not the technically soundest scrummager, but he is just he just relies on power. And like at the end of the day, scrummaging has become a lost art in a lot of ways in rugby. And realistically, if you have semi-decent scrummagers who can carry the ball 15 times a game or 10 times a game, the coaches are going to swing in that direction. Schumann and Porter would be a great like for like as 1 and 2. Genge, maybe not so much. He probably doesn't have as high a level of work rate in terms of carrying numbers, but Porter just he's all action, isn't he? And he's all attitude as well, which is important because it's the Lions. You can't take yourself too seriously. You know, like look, the speeches and all that are great fun, but hopefully we won't take ourselves too seriously on a Lions podcast. It's not the big lights of the URC like.
He's fit as well. That's the thing, is that he's not many props can play 70 plus minutes at test match level week in, week out.
Him and Ferguson played 68 minutes yesterday, and he was still going. He wasn't blowing when he came off. I think he could have played 80 if it was necessary. He was unbelievable yesterday. But we are talking about Porter. But as a 1 and a 3, I think those two head and shoulders above everyone else that's available. I think.
Let's come to you then, Ben, for your game. So Scotland played Italy. Which of the players for Scotland in that game do you think put forward their case the best to be a Lions contender?
It's an obvious choice. I was going to either go for Ferguson or Huw Jones, but I went for Huw Jones just because it was a hat trick yesterday, and he is one of those players that I would have said 4 years ago was probably losing his way in rugby. He wasn't really sure what position he was playing. He had to go at 12, he had to go at 13, and then played at 15 for Harlequins, and that was a bit of a disaster that time in Southwest London. But yesterday, the way he plays off Darcy Graham's runs was incredible, and the second try, in particular, where Darcy Graham's broken through, beaten 6 or 7 defenders in one run, and then Huw Jones is just peeling off the wing, ready for that pass. Sorry, not offload to you. I've got to be careful how I verse my lexicon in the passing stakes with you around. But he sorted out his defensive game as well. He carried for 80 odd meters yesterday, 13 runs, and then just impeccable. He didn't put a foot wrong yesterday. And you often see wingers picking up hat tricks. Doohan's done it, but an outside centre getting a hat trick in a Six Nations game.
The quality of the finishing as well. It took some finishing, some of those tries.
It did. Yeah, none of them were. The second one was easy, but obviously that was off hard work by Darcy. But the third one in particular, I think he beat 3 or 4 defenders between the 5 metre line and dotting down. I feel like he's a 13 that I don't think other countries have got a 13 like him.
He's a lot more active than Ringrose. Maybe, Caolan, this is kind of the debate to bring you in, because I feel like it's one of those two, is Huw Jones and Gary Ringrose, and this isn't the head-to-head that's coming.
No, I feel like it's set up to be the head-to-head next week, unless the sevens. Not.
We'll
see, it's important to look ahead to next week, so subscribers will keep coming back. Got to play that game, but no, like they're not the same. I think the lad we're going to talk about in the head-to-head later on is Ollie Lawrence. I think Ollie Lawrence is probably a more Andy Farrell type 13 in terms of he has that power off the edge. He likes his centres to be like flankers, which Farrell kind of was, relative to the game he played in. But with Huw Jones, I think there is an air of excitement that you have Huw Jones along with Bundee, Tuipolatu, Henshaw, whoever, whether it's Finn at 10, Marcus Smith at 10, I don't know, Ben Thomas at 10. I'm just not going to mention Irish 10s for the next 5 weeks if I can at all. But I think Huw Jones, he could work with anyone. He could go forward with anyone. There will always be question marks about his defence 1-on-1 because Scotland...
a lot better than it used to be.
It's better than it used to be, but then Scotland's defensive system is very, very strong. And Steve Tandy, I think Steve Tandy and Felix Jones are the two favourites to be the defence coach on the Lions tour. Now, Sean Edwards has thrown his name in the hat, but Edwards and Tandy defensive systems are not...
Zero chance that France allow that to happen. Absolutely zero.
And zero, because they need someone to do the press conferences down in New Zealand. They'll have no one else to do it. But I think Huw Jones is... Look, he's quality. He's absolutely quality. Last time I seen him live, he was tearing up Munster in Thomond Park. So I gotta mention that as well. But look, the two Scotland centres, Tuipolata and Jones, as of right now are there. I think Andy Farrell is almost hoping for an injury because between the three Irish lads and the two Scottish lads, someone has to miss out, really.
There's a depth at 12 and 13 that I don't think we've ever had before across
Yeah.
three of the four
And
nations.
that's
I
before you
think.
get to England, where I do think Ollie Lawrence is in the hunt. And I
Yeah,
think there's always room for a utility guy, be it Elliot Daly, Tom Jordan, and so on and so forth. Max Llewellyn, potentially, just throwing his name out there because he got mentioned more times from not playing than playing. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So on to my contender there from the Wales game. Obviously, not many stood out for Wales out in Paris. It was a very tough game, but the one that everyone I think will agree on, and it's going to be difficult
yeah.
for me to come up with a contender next week, is Captain Jac Morgan. I had a very troubling realization just earlier this evening while I was thinking about Jac Morgan. Jac Morgan is Wales's Sergio Parise, in that he is our genuinely world-class player who is standing out in a team that is getting its backside kicked every single week at the moment. But what a player this guy is. So he has got an X factor that not many of the other flankers do. I know that Rory Darge had a great game against Italy. I would say that the majority of Ireland's flankers are workmanlike, with the exception of Ryan Baird, who is X Factor. Jac Morgan is X Factor. He can do a lot of stuff. As an edge forward, I would say he's the best back row in the UK as an edge forward in terms of his ability to step, to fend, to power through a tackle. The number of times I've seen him do it for the Scarlets and for Wales, it's a superpower. And he's a small enough guy, 180 tall. He's walked past me, and I was surprised at how diminutive he seemed for an elite level rugby player. But my goodness, this is how to pack a punch, how to punch above your weight. It's all about the attitude for Jac. And he's smart. His rugby IQ is fantastic. He can do a crossfield kick. He can make a line break. He can make an offload. Like the try that Wales scored against Australia in the World Cup just gone, where he makes the line break and puts Gareth Davies away. It's not many flankers are doing that. He's got real pace, and he's got that leadership that you're going to need on a Lions door. He won't be phased by playing for the Lions. So I think for me, if you are asking 100 people who's Wales's man that's going to go on the Lions store, I think all 100 say Jac Morgan.
I think it's going to be very fun next week when you have to say that Morgan Jack is going to be your contender next week because he's just head and shoulders above the rest. Like I was working Friday night and I kind of half caught the game because I work in a pub, so like it was on. But he's just everywhere. Like he's absolutely everywhere. And like I think 7 is fascinating because like Josh Van der Fleer is back to the form of when he won his World Player of the Year award. Maybe not as glamorous at the moment because Ireland aren't necessarily playing as well, but he's in that kind of form. Roy Darge was excellent
Roy
on
Dodge was
Saturday.
excellent yesterday. His Jacqueline yesterday was
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I think
Yeah,
there's always a live possibility that if someone gets injured that we could see Caolan Dar start at 7 for the Lions. Just because Ireland have deployed him there, they know that he can do that role. Again, depending on who the coaches are, too early to say. Ben Earl will be similar. There's Jack Willis, who is arguably the form back rower over the last 12 months in the Northern Hemisphere, but he's in France. He might be able to tour.
Not playing Test rugby.
Not playing. Well, look, might be better off. Some players are better off not playing Test rugby for their aura at times. But Jac Morgan, to me, if I was to pick two Welsh players who I said had to be there on the tour, and I'm saying this now before the losing run gets any worse, and it's him and Dowie Lake, and I don't know if that's Dowie or Dewey or whatever it is.
Dairy, like eggs.
I could
I've
barely
been
say your own name,
educated
Hugh,
many
with my
times.
accent. So look, whatever it
Shout
is,
out
what
to
it
the
is.
guy who replied to the pod last week saying, it's not zebra, it's zebra. So just remember, next time you say zebra, say
I think it
zebra,
was
right?
Zebra.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah, no. If I was to pick two, it would be Lake and Morgan, and I do think he's in a serious shout to start. To be honest, I think that blindside flanker role is up for grabs. I think they'll go with like a third lock. I think they'll go Itoje, Byrne possibly at 6, and maybe James Ryan, something like that. Or they could go with a Chesham and go for power. but I do think there is a starting berth there for someone.
What do you reckon, Ben? What you're saying on Jac Morgan?
Exactly what you boys have said. Like, he was impeccable. I mean, it must be so chastening for him to play that well and be part of the 43-0 defeat. But he was just everywhere, wasn't he? You think what the score would have been without him? It could have been more. It could have been closer to 60 or 70 on Friday night. But he was the only player that really stood out from a Welsh perspective that can kind of leave that pitch with his head held high. But yeah, he has to go. You look at the meters he's carried, 81 meters carried for a back row. It's incredible. 21 tackles.
21
Yeah,
tackles.
21 tackles. I know it was busy. I know they were doing a lot of tackling. And did he miss any? Because I know there were a lot of Welsh missed tackles, and I suspect he wasn't really responsible for many of them. So
I feel like it was low. Like even if it was, he didn't miss 10 tackles, obviously, but even if it was like 5 or 6, a lot of them were probably, France running up the gut, which happened an awful lot. And we're not going to review the entire game, but
some of it's relevant. Yeah,
a lot of it is what happened was France ran straight over the top of Wales. Then Wales had to get so narrow to 2-man that Antoine Dupont said,
let's go
eyeball.
wide. Yeah.
I turn up now, and he look. If France were eligible for the Lions, there's no way we're not starting the show without talking about Antoine Dupont. And I think it's only fair he gets one mention per episode. So that's just my 2 cents.
I don't know about that. I think he's banned from all episodes from now on.
Can we very quickly mention Intermac's cowardly behaviour on Friday night? That was appalling. Like, that's one of the worst. And it was interesting because it was a result, and Sam Woodman picked this up yesterday, that it looked like there was a bit of afters about 5 minutes before on quite a dominant hit for the Welsh player. I can't remember who it was at the time.
Ben Thomas.
Ben Thomas,
yeah. But that was poor. And I think I'd be getting him to miss the rest of the tournament for something as bad as that, because it was just... It was cowardly behaviour, and it was violent, and it was malicious, and it was very much intentional.
Yeah. Well, just to finish on Jac Morgan, even if you look down at club level, obviously the Ospreys have bounced back in spectacular fashion in the last few games. But I've watched games this season where between Jac Morgan and Justin Tipuric, they've been working miracles. They're absolutely working miracles to keep the Ospreys in games where they've been outplayed. And now that the Ospreys are turning it around and playing some nice rugby, I think we're going to see the best of Jac Morgan for the rest of the season.
Base to build on for the club side, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. All right, now we get into the exciting bit of the show, the head-to-head. And this week, the giveaway is in the thumbnail because we're talking about Bundee Aki versus Ollie Lawrence. So if I can just make the Excel work, I'm going to bring out the stats for the two from this specific game. So this is this specific game between the two of them on Saturday. This is not career statistics. And we'll talk about the differences between them. So, Caolan, obviously, this is the game that you watch most closely, the game that you've poured over the most. In this game, Aki achieved 10 carries to Lawrence's 5, but Lawrence achieved much better meters per carry, 4.6 to Aki's 2.6. Lawrence also beat more defenders. Aki passed the ball more, but that might be because he was playing number 12. We'll talk about that more in a second. Both got the same number of offloads. Lawrence, no turnovers lost. Lawrence also got 12 out of 12 tackles, which is no mean feat. And then line-out takes. Bundee Aki was the recipient of a long throw. Bundee Aki also conceded no penalties, and of course he scored that fantastic try. So I guess, Caolan, we put these in the head-to-head. One was playing 12 and one was playing 13, but both have played both positions to test level. What would you say are the similarities and the differences between Bundee Aki and Ollie Lawrence?
I could go really controversial and just say, well, Bundee Aki is one of the best centres Ireland has ever had, and Ollie Lawrence is not one of the best centres England has ever had. But that would be really rude. I would never say such a thing. No, look, Bundee is world class. Like, look, he is. Do you know the meme is like just when you're out, they draw you back in? Bundee is kind of that, because you go long enough between international windows, you're like, maybe it's time we phase out Bundee Aki and his reliance in this team, and then he just does something incredible. And like that try. Like, look, I know it's 2 halfbacks. I know it's Marcus Smith, Alex Mitchell, and Tommy Freeman. It's still 3 defenders. He can't go left. He literally cannot go left. He's on the touchline. He has to go straight. They all leave a dent on him. He shakes them all off. And like, we could get into stats like, okay, may not carry as many meters. Yeah, because he was Ireland's first phase option so often. Prendergast stands, passes to Aki. Aki hits it up, often two-man tackle, be it by Curry or whoever. Oh yeah, I think we could just watch that over and over. In fairness, Tommy Freeman does a good job when you see it from that angle. Smith, not so
Tries to
much.
keep him up, doesn't it?
Alex
Yeah.
Mitchell, thanks for coming.
Alex Richards, thanks, but like, there's almost a determination. I know someone said it there. Like, I don't know whose tweet that is. You can see his light flash before his eyes. Marcus Smith, Keen Tracy, yeah, Keen's a keen sound. But it's Bundee's eyes. His eyes lights up. It's I'm gonna score this because even like, do you know the way when you're watching a match and the camera doesn't adjust because they don't think a ball is gonna go a certain direction? That's what happened here. They just thought, oh, Bundee's just gonna get tackled. They never even zoomed in. You didn't know if he got the ball down because they were like, oh, he scored. But to kind of go back to the stats, like, to Lawrence's credit, I actually think he did all right. Carries not a huge pile. As we said, tackled really well. I think England's defensive performance, Huw, I know you're going to disagree with me, but I think England's defensive performance was good. As Sam Warburton said tonight on the BBC, individual errors cost them, not the system. The system was fine.
That's part of defending.
Okay, Jesus Christ, nobody take it out of me. But anyways, Ollie Lawrence made 12 tackles out of 12 attempts, so he should get credit for that. But I think all in all, I think Bundee won this battle. I do think Lawrence is on the outside looking in when it comes to this debate. I think it is Aki versus Dewey Pilato. It is Jones versus Ringrose. And then if anyone gets injured, Robbie Henshaw is there and ready to get on a third Lions tour. I think he's on the outside looking in just based on how Ireland have often gone. And that's typically Aki, Ringrose when they're all fit. Again, just my opinion. But I would go Henshaw. I would have Henshaw in there. I'd have started Henshaw over Ringrose at the weekend, but Ringrose played well as well. But all in all, Bundee, excellent. Yes, he missed 2 tackles. You could look at that. Yes, they didn't make a huge amount of line breaks. People say Bundee doesn't pass. Bundee does pass. Yeah, played 12 as opposed to 13. Fair enough. But he was excellent. And as well as that, Ollie Lawrence played 80 minutes. Bundee played 58 or 56, something like that. So that is a factor here as well. Had more carries, more meters. A lot of the time was running down dark alleys more than Ollie Lawrence. But the only thing is, if you met Bundee Aki in a dark alley, it's the defender who should be afraid, not Bundee. So I think that was the story of this game for him. He was really, really good. I should give a shout out.
Could these two play together at 12 and 13?
They could, but I feel like you get a little bit one-dimensional. Because I think Lawrence at test level should be a 12 because of his frame and all that, his handling ability, his defensive ability. Club level, it makes sense to have him at 13. Bundee used to play an awful lot of 13 for Connacht after Robbie Henshaw left in particular. Used to play 13 with Bundee Aki at 12, actually. There's a blast in the past. People might remember Bundee Aki used to be at Connacht. But I don't see how, unless there's an injury, that Ollie Lawrence tours. I like Ollie Lawrence. I think he's a good player. I rate Bath highly as a club and as a team, but I still think 2 Scottish guys, 3 Irish guys are all ahead of him, and chances are we're going to see a Jordan, an Owen Farrell, or someone like that, a utility player who can cover centre touring anyway. So I think he's on the outside. But it would be fun in its own way. But I do feel like if this was, a different alternate universe, we'd be talking about Bundee and Tui Pilato next week, and we would all be licking our lips at the prospects of them playing even 2 minutes together in the Lions jersey, because that would be so much fun. Imagine how much slapping their chest and annoying the opposition those two would be together. Like, that would be insane. Ollie Lawrence is good at that too, to be fair. But yeah, I gotta go Bundee. I love Bundee. I would make Bundee Irish captain if it was my decision. Like, genuinely, like that's not even bullshit. I would. I think he's everything that's right about Irish rugby. But yeah.
Backs can't be captains. Ben, what's your take on Ollie Lawrence?
I think I'm going to agree with Caolan. This is on the outside looking in. I think he's probably the 6th or 7th centre option going into the summer. I think he's going to have to rely on an injury. It's hard to sort of look at this objectively because I just have a bit of a huge dislike for the English national team at the moment. I find them really difficult to watch. I don't enjoy watching them play. I think they were good for the parts yesterday, but then Ireland pulled away in the second half. He's beaten defenders. He's clearly shown that he's good at going through contact, and the tackle count is pretty good for someone playing at 13, I think 12 from 12 is pretty impressive, especially when you're tackling at pace there. It's not the slow ball that's coming at you, it's someone running at you at full tilt. So, yeah, I think he's got a chance, but I think it's going to be dependent on one or two injuries, because I think it will be the 3 Irish lads and the 2 Scots that will go over anybody else.
Yeah, I think that's what counts against him is that he's kind of on his own against combinations. No disrespect to Henry Slade, but I haven't seen many people talking about him going.
I don't think he'll go.
So if you're gonna pick like Aki with either Henshaw or Ringrose, or Tuipulotu with Huw Jones, like Ollie Lawrence has got to be able to break up an already established world-class centre pairing. And it's funny you say, Caolan, about him as a 12 because he's been tried as a 12 at test level and it didn't work. Like Steve Borthwick has swapped around Slade and Ollie Lawrence. And I've seen Ollie Lawrence play, like I said, inside centre several times in an England shirt, and it's never really looked right. It's never really come off. People wanted him to be Manu Tuilagi Mark II, and he just isn't. And if you read someone like Charlie Morgan, who writes really well about English rugby, he says, no, that's not his game. A lot of people in English rugby say, no, he is a 13. But he's clearly obviously a very good player. I do think he's an international class player now. I think he started his England career a little bit early for me. But like I said, if you frame it does he break up Huw Pilotu or one of Ireland's, like I think I posted the other day that 3 of the top 5 centre combinations in the Six Nations are Ireland. I just don't see him disrupting that, to be honest.
And just one last thing on that. Like, I have huge respect for Charlie Morgan as an analyst as well. And I'm not going to try and discredit him or disagree with him. My only caveat to that would be England have not been a top attacking side since well before Ollie Lawrence came into the team. Whereas Bath, and yes, it's a different standard, have had a very decent attacking system. And I think a huge difference there is England's pack probably hasn't gotten them go forward. We could talk about England's bench for about an hour because I don't think they left any impact in that game yesterday. But in general, say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think 10 has been okay for England. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 have consistently been on the wrong side. Whereas at Bath, that's the numbers they're winning. They've got Underhill hitting everything. They've got, massive second rows. Thomas Dutoy is a difference maker for them. I think if you put Lawrence in the Scottish or the Irish team at 12 or 13, I think you'd find a way for him to look good. Kind of similarly to how Tuipulotu can slot in and out at Scotland. I think you'd see something similar from Lawrence. It's not about being Manu Tuilagi 2.0 or Bundee Aki 2.0. It's just the fact that nothing around him has been going right. And I will give him the benefit. And even Henry Slade had a nice touch for the try. But Henry Slade I don't think he's an international centre in 2025. And he was a great player. And he will go down as being one of Exeter's best ever players, if not their best ever. But I don't think he's still an international standard player. And that's part of the point. And God love him, Caden Murley had a howler of a debut after that try. Like the stuff you wouldn't wish on your worst nightmare, or your worst enemy. I mean, so I think that's a bigger issue. Is just England have not been an attacking force for how many years? 5 years now, 6 since the 2019 World Cup, arguably. So
yeah, go with that.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, let's now move on to the final part of the show where we talk about our Lions bolters. These are players that up until now haven't really been mentioned in dispatches, but we think based on the performance they put in at the weekend, they could pop up on that plane. So, Caolan, we're going to start with you again, and your bolter this week is England's hooker, Theo Dan.
yeah, I wanted to keep it balanced. I didn't really want to go with 2 Irish lads, and as much as everything else, I don't know if there's any Irish player who can be a bolter because of the Andy Farrell factor and how much I genuinely believe we'll see 15 Irish lads in the touring panel. I want to go with Theo Dan because I think hooker is a depth chart that is slim. I think you've got Jamie George, he still has a lot to offer, but he is aging out. You've got Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheehan, who look, like I could have mentioned Dan Sheehan at the start of the show. How good was Dan Sheehan at the weekend?
He's phenomenal.
He is
unbelievable. I think he starts for every team in the world. I think he's amazing.
Yeah.
I do as well, to be honest. Imagine a 1-2 punch of him and Marks in the box jersey. Oh my God. Anyways, we should be doing other things on Sunday night than talking about these. But the the reason I chose Theo Dan is, as I said, England with Jamie Jordan. I think he's aging out. I don't think Luke Cowan-Dickie had a good game. I don't think he's Lions quality. There's the two Irish lads who I think are going to be thereabouts. Sheehan starts. It's who's behind him. You have Scotland. I think they've got a lot of good club player hookers.
I don't think any Scottish hookers at all, in my
I
opinion.
don't either. And then you've got Dewey Lake, whatever way you pronounce it, Mr. Lake from the Ospreys, who I think he goes, but he's expected to be out till April. So I think that third shirt is wide open, and there could be an injury there. Theo Dan is robust. He's powerful. He has a good line-out throw. He actually had one of the best spin efficiencies of the weekend. Looking at the post-game,
What is spin efficiency?
basically like your spiral on your line-out, so it's not wobbling, essentially. So like you're throwing
Stays like a
darts.
dart. Yeah, throwing
Yeah,
darts. Yeah, that
essentially.
makes sense.
That's kind of what they look at, like, because they want the throws to be like NFL throws, not basketball throws. I think that's essentially it. I'm that's how it was explained to me. He's got good line-out thrower. He's got good pop. He made 5 carries, made a lot of strong carries at the weekend. I think he's going to play himself into form because he's in a Saracens team, not into form, but play himself into contention in a Saracens team that will go deep in the Premiership. I think he's thereabouts. As of right now, I could make a case for him being the bench hooker, to be honest, because I think he is quite similar to Dan Sheehan in ways. Sheehan would
agree.
play in more exposed spaces, more one-on-ones, or in midfield throwing tip-on passes, because that's just what he does. But I think there's a very strong case for him to be meant to be there. The only issue is, in a Lions tour that's going to be full of younger players and first-time Lions, Jamie George probably has the edge over
Yes,
Kelleher,
I
Lake,
agree. I think James
Dan.
George will go because of his been there, done that-ness of it.
But then it's the other three. It's Dan, Kelleher, Lake. If they're all fit, Kelleher and Lake have had injury problems. You don't know. The Red Sea could part and Theo Dan could walk straight into the Test 23. We don't know how these things will go, but I think as of right now, I think he's the player you go with. And I think England made the wrong decision not to start him anyways. Jamie George is back this weekend. I think you start Theo Dan though. I really do.
I think Theo Dan's going to win a lot of England caps. I think he's extremely talented. He's very modern, like you said. He's got a lot of Dan Sheehan about him. He's young. He's also Romania qualified. Is my little trivia about Theo Dan.
I love that bit of trivia.
What's your take on him, Ben?
I'm going to have to say that I didn't see the part he played yesterday in the second half, but based on what Caolan says, I think he's got a lot of potential there, and I'd agree.
Good, thank you. I'm glad that we
Yeah.
all agree. Right, so who's
Yeah.
who's your bolter then, Ben?
It's Jonny Gray, and I think he's been out injured, and he's come straight back into that second row yesterday. It was just phenomenal. Like his carries, his offloads, his contact.
Line out
He's
work?
been around, fantastic. Just everything about his performance yesterday was absolutely fantastic, and he just gets himself around that part, and he's got the experience and the guile. Like him and his brother, like that they were 4 and 5 for Scotland for a period of time until injuries kind of parted them, and Richie obviously went off to France, had some issues there. Getting his standard back up until he came back to Glasgow. Jonny Gray sort of at Exeter, things didn't really work out, but now he's gone to France and he's kind of got himself back into that sort of 2019, 2020 sort of performance, category that we've been missing for a few years. And I think on current form, he's going to be first choice lock for the rest of the tournament quite easily after the way he played yesterday. I think it was a slight gamble, Townsend starting him yesterday, but it certainly paid off with his management of the game. I thought what was quite interesting yesterday, and I won't go label the point too much, is the way he goes into contact, and he was going in spinning and then looking to pass off the contact, which is something I hadn't really seen him do an awful lot before. So I don't
You'll
know
have
if that was
learned
like
that
something
at
that
Bordeaux.
but it worked yesterday, and it just got quick ball. And I think maybe our first try maybe came off him doing that. I'm not sure I've got that exactly right, but it felt like he was very pivotal in that first phase play for them. Scotland to score the first try within the sort of first 5 minutes. But yeah, I think he's one of those people who is just no strings attached, gets on with it, very professional. He's not a big talker, but you can just see the way he sort of carries himself as just that influence on the rest of the Scottish forwards yesterday. And it was pivotal. And I think when you have a lock like him, he's just so dependable and reliable. I think he's someone that can offer the Lions a lot over the summer. I was looking at his stats like yesterday, and 10 passes, so that would make sense the way he was playing yesterday. It's not often you see a lock making 10 passes. 12 meters run.
Can I get
Off,
mean
off
for a
10
second?
runs.
How many of those passes
Yeah.
struck? Because Scotland tried an awful lot of passes to hit the ground, and it's not all his fault. But
Well,
Yeah.
Scotland stats wise topped most stats this weekend in attack, like carries, offloads, passes, things like that. I think the scoreline kind of does Scotland a bit of a disservice against Italy. I think it was nowhere near as close as it sometimes felt watching the game if you look at the underlying numbers. But Caolan, the second row, I think you've got the two standouts, which are Tyg Ben and Maro Itoje, are the two that pick themselves almost. If we're looking for that number three lock, maybe not as the one that plays at 6, but maybe if the Lions are thinking of going to 6-2, is Jonny Gray, does he have a path into that 23?
he does. I think Jonny Gray. I think what kind of gets mistaken, and this is kind of the weird thing about it as well. Jonny Gray is still he's a big second row, but because his brother was literally a behemoth for anyone to come from the Northern Hemisphere, we kind of forget that. Jonny Gray will hit everything that moves. He's a good line-out operator. Obviously a very slick handler of the ball, and I was just taking the piss there. For any Scotland fans, I genuinely did enjoy Scotland's performance, but from a kind of, if this sticks, this could be really, really fun kind of way. Definitely there's a path, but again, the fact that he's in Bordeaux is a factor because again, you're expecting them to go deep in the top 14, kind of like with Jack Willis.
Yeah.
I
point.
think there is a lot of players there. I would have Gray in the same category as, say, Daffy Jenkins, for one. I'm going to throw Adam Beard in there because Adam Beard was not a popular pick last time around, so I'm just going to throw his name in just for the crack. I think the three Irish lads in Toje, I would have Chesham in that same bracket as well. Likewise Gilchrist and likewise Martin. I think all of them are battling it out to hopefully get in. Chesham, for me, has the advantage because he can play 6 quite proficiently. And he could bring that extra power element to a pack, especially if you go 6-2. But depending on who drops out, there might be an injury. I could see if, say, James Ryan got injured or Toji got injured, that you bring straight up Jonny Gray. He's experienced, he's line-out caller, he does all that, he's all action. Then you could go with him. It just depends on who's available, who's not available. But yeah, he's there, but I'd have him in kind of category 2 of outside looking in, but it's tight, I think.
Interesting. No, I think he's one to keep an eye on. I hadn't considered your point there of he's playing in Bordeaux and they're going to be in the top 14 playoffs around when
Potentially
the
a final.
Lions door are going. That does count
Yeah.
against him. That does make it difficult. So that's an interesting one.
And the squad will probably be named around around European semi-final or final time, based on history. It's usually around then. Bordeaux could be in that competition and top of the top 40 at the same time. And I'm not saying it will count against him. It could count for him. Don't get me wrong. Like, looking good in a good team, like, that means something. But it could count against him as well. And I'd hate to see, because I think he didn't tour last time, I don't think. I don't think, like, he has test line written all over him. Like Jonny Gray, for the career he's had, he's always been brilliant. Yes, there's the element of his brother came out first and got the plaudits, but no, I would just have him in that second tier. And I think that's kind of how we're going to have this conversation a lot of the next 2 weeks. There's probably 3 guys in every position that you're like, I'd probably lean towards them. But then in most positions, it is kind of, like 7 we'll get into that we kind of half discussed. I think winger is another one. Centre, 10 potentially. There's a lot of kind of maybe this way, maybe that way. So lots of time. I think if we're smart, we'll do one more show of this after the Six Nations, but before the squad is announced, and just to see what we all say.
Oh, looking into the future. Okay, my bolter, and I think mine is the most boltery of the bolters, is Wales's Tom Rogers, who played on the wing against France. He also had a great game on the wing against Australia. So Tom Rogers, if you just said to me 6 months ago, Tom Rogers, British and Irish Lions, I'd have said nowhere near, because he was nowhere near Wales starter, to be honest. Tom Rogers kind of burst on the scene a few years ago, talent coming out of his ears, could step you in a phone box, could finish great, and then he went off the boil. He massively went off the boil. And on the Scarlets pod last year, I said, I feel like I'm watching this guy's career passing by because he had, like I said, had all the talent, got injuries, and just wasn't showing it. And it was kind of like he played once well in a good moon, once in a blue moon. But this season for the Scarlets, he has really turned it on. He has really turned it on, and he's added an aerial game that didn't really know that he had. He's been phenomenal in the air, and we do think that his future is as a fullback. Maybe he lacks the pace for an out-and-out test wing, but in an Andy Farrell team, how important is absolute pace on the wing? Judging off the island selections, not totally important at the moment. But he's got some arrogance about him as well. He can finish acrobatically, and sometimes he does an acrobatic finish where one isn't needed, such as here. He just chucks his legs in the air just because for the fun of it. And like I said, he's just a jack in the box. He's he can step you. He's got enough gas to make it work. Fantastic in the air. I would say that if you're comparing him to someone like Darcy Graham's footwork I'd say is better, but I'd say that Jac Morgan's better in the air. And just he always goes forward, even when you expect him not to. And he's not a player who goes forward through bulk. He's a player that goes forward through agility, and he always makes that ground. And in the first half against France, not only was he good going forward, but he saved 2 tries. He held up Antoine Dupont over the line, and he kind of saved a spilt ball backwards that looked set for a scruffy kind of own goal almost. He saved that, and he's saved plenty of tries for the Scarlets as well this season. So for me, he is very much an outsider, but that's something a bit different. And like I said, his skill set is pretty complete. The only thing is that he gets subbed on 60 minutes every single game, which is unusual for a back 3 player. It makes me think that he's maybe carrying something. But when he's on the pitch, it's really working. So I'm not expecting you guys to know tons about Tom Rogers. So I'll just leave it open-ended for a second there. You got anything else to add on the guy?
I think wing's the hardest place to see a bolter come in, because I think there's a lot of talent there at the moment. I think James Lowe, Darcy, Doohan, Blair Kinghorn can play there as well. I think it's the hardest place to see someone bolt into, because I think some of the wing talent we have is generational. I think we've got some of the best wingers we probably ever had in those four, in the Northern Hemisphere. Like world class wingers. Like James Lowe was incredible yesterday.
Yeah.
Darcy was incredible. Doohan, I think, was carrying an injury yesterday. He was quiet by his own standards, but still, had the guile to pass through for Huw Jones when usually he would go on the outside. I think he's maybe added that into his game, that ability to pass instead of running straight. But Graham and Kinghorn yesterday were incredible. So I think the wings and fullback is probably settling with Hugo Keane, and I'm struggling to see how Tom Rogers fits into that equation.
Yeah, I think Rogers will struggle to get in. I think any Welsh back 3 will struggle to get in, unfortunately. I think Tommy Freeman will be thereabouts again.
Freddie Stewart might go. Yeah,
Stewart could
Too
go.
one-dimensional in my opinion.
Could go. I think Freeman's going to be thereabouts because I think Northampton will go on a run at the end of the season. I think obviously Faye Boso is due back from injury post Six Nations. I think we could see him get in there. Would be a kind of winger the Far would like. Mac Hansen we haven't mentioned. I think a bolter, even though he may not play the Six Nations, if Ireland stick with the same back 3 like they always do, could be Jamie Osborne, with Keenan being looked at as an extra winger, and Osborne as being one of those utility players to cover wing, fullback, centre. And yeah,
which
and
Tom
like
Jordan can also do. Yeah, so there's
which
a couple
Jordan
of
could
people.
also do.
I'd take Tom Jordan every day of the week. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to talk more about him on a future episode.
I'm sure we will.
Okay,
I'll make sure we do.
excellent. Thank you, Ben. So that brings us to the
Right.
end of our first episode of Picking the Pride. Thank you to everyone for listening. I think as a first go, it worked well. Hopefully, we'll get South African Ireland to bring in a bit of non-biased, non-partisan viewpoint to it next week. And it just leaves me to say, enjoy your rugby, and I hope everybody's team wins. Cheers.
Cheers, boys.